In this video, I'm going to conclude this short series on self-determination by discussing the third component, which is relatedness, following competency and autonomy. Now, you'll recall that the term self-determination is our descriptor of a young adult, mid-teens, who possesses the attitudes, skills, the habits of mind to lead a life of growth, to thrive and to flourish lifelong, year after year, decade after decade. It's an outlook of on life, on how to grow. It's what I call often a becoming life. And it also describes natural tendencies, natural human inclinations that are there in every human being, but you need an environment that fosters it, that cultivates it, so it's brought to fruition. So people realize, or young people can begin to realize what are their potentials and have some degree of personal satisfaction and fulfillment. Now, becoming is not a new term. It's sprinkled in history and in literature and in the sciences. And I have a little anecdote I came across just as an illustration of that. Recently, I read a letter by Kurt Vonnegut, the author, Slaughterhouse-Five. He wrote to some high school students to encourage them. And he says this: "What I have to say to you doesn't take long. It's not necessarily that deep. But anyway, practice. Practice whatever it is you want to do, whether it is music or singing or dancing or acting or drawing or painting or sculpting or writing or whatever kind of interest that you have. Practice it, no matter how good you are at it, or no matter how poorly you do. And it's not to make money, and it won't be to get fame, but it's to experience becoming, and to find out what's inside of you, to make your soul grow." And that's at the core of what we're discussing in these videos on self-determination. Now, when you look at education from this vantage point, then we define education, particularly in elementary and in middle school, as creating momentum for growth. Though it includes your traditional subjects, math, social studies, science, and so on, at the same time, it addresses at a deeper level the training that's needed during these course studies to lead a life of becoming and to gain the necessary habits and attitudes. Now, in order to talk about becoming in practical terms, I've also borrowed another term, self-determination, and that's from the literature and self-determination theory, because this term represents science's contribution to how human beings might lead a life of growth and fulfillment. And then, of course, it mirrors what history has already suggested about the pathways to growth and to becoming. So as I've mentioned previously, it uncovers first competency, which is a history of achievement, a history of successes that go into building self-confidence, self-worth, which are critical factors in growth. Hard to stretch forward and reach for something more if you don't have a certain degree of self-confidence based on your history of competency. Then secondly was autonomy, and it's kind of the exercise of what freedom truly is. You learn to understand what you are, to analyze, and to think critically about the choices you have in life, and to imagine what are the possibilities for what you can become and how you can contribute to your world. That's real freedom, freedom to grow and to make the world better. That's autonomy, and that's an outlook for growth and becoming. Now, the third component is called relatedness, or I would call it positive connection to community. It's right to be rightly connected to the world and the people around us. In that connection, I'm looking to grow. This is a little bit different. I'll mention this a few times. We all have our friends we like to hang out with. We like the same sorts of things. This connection to community is a little bit different. There's a different outlook on how I'm connected to people. It's the people that will help me grow. It is the community that will help me grow. It is the community that will teach me more about who I am so that I can make a greater contribution to my world. To be rightly related to the world, to recognize the need for community and for the need to be in community. That doesn't imply to be with a group where there's group think, or there's some kind of indoctrination, or I'm of this political party, or I'm of that religion, which means you're a part of a whole system of ideas and thoughts, and you belong to all of them. It doesn't mean that. It means in community, I am connected to a whole bunch of different kinds of people with different experiences, with different perspectives, with different outlooks on life. And every one of them can be a source for my learning that can awaken me to the possibilities of who I might become, can awaken me to the type of person I could become. It sharpens my realization of who I am, and it helps me to focus and understand what are the highest planes of life to live on. That's the connection to community. That's relatedness. It's related to my growth and my ability to contribute to the world that I live in. Apart from community, we really limit the possibilities of learning, what we can be and what we can contribute to our community. Now, when we talk about being in community, there's really two conditions to be in a community in this way, in a way of growing. The first one is sort of imposed on us, and we can do this with children, with our students, with our children who play on our team, or with our own children in our home. Number one, we need love. Now, I don't mean that in a mushy sense. I mean that in a very productive sense. You see, we need to feel that we're secure, that somebody's got our back, that if I fail, somebody's going to come alongside of me. In that kind of love, I can have hope. And in hope, I'm willing to stretch forward. I'm willing to try new things. I'm willing to grow. Because again, somebody's got my back. Somebody's alongside of me. Somebody's going to catch me. Somebody's going to support me. You see, so in this way, whether we're talking about our own children, we're talking about children in a classroom, we're talking about children who are on an athletic team that we're coaching, toward those students, we exercise to understand them, to support them, to offer kindness and forbearance toward them. We listen to them, and we create an environment that stimulates hope because they're secure. And we create an environment that creates willingness to stretch, to grow, to try new things. And we also love them in a way that will lead them to the highest plane of life, depending on their abilities and their capacities, but we expect the most of them. That's why this is not mushy love. There's a lot of mush to it, and there should be lots of hugs and kisses, maybe. That's all a part of it. But also, there's always the drive to lift them onto a higher plane. These are the people who really love us, are the ones who not only support us, but are always pushing us to a higher level. In my classes, I use this 90%, 10% model, which means 90% of my work with children has to be so positive, so encouraging, so uplifting that they want to grow. They like being there. Now there's 10% that's quite firm. I have standards for you. I expect you to reach them, and by golly, I'm not gonna compromise. We're gonna get there. That's 10% that needs to be there in the back of their mind. They need to know, don't mess around with Mr. D because he expects something of us. But 90% is positive, encouraging, helpful, supportive, do whatever you can. Now, the second condition to be engaged in a community for knowing so that I can grow has to do with, and to be with people who can lift me onto a higher plane of life. That is, they give us help us with the attitudes, an awareness of how others might enrich my life. That's the realm in which I join it for that reason. I need to be with people that I can learn from, not only the ones that are far above me, but with the people around me, how to live in community so that I can grow. Our ears are open, our eyes are open, our heart is open. When these little sparks of light can occur, and we realize, boy, I never looked at it this way. Wow, I never knew you could work this way. Wow, I didn't realize you had to do this for achievement. You're learning in this kind of community. You've joined the community not just for pleasure, not just to satisfy your momentary enjoyments, which is necessary. I'm not discounting that at all, but you're there to learn lessons about life, new lessons to discover who we are. And we discover lessons on how to become. This is critical to enabling us to grow and to be related in a community that will cause us to grow. Now, there's really three components. We can three questions that we can ask ourselves in having this attitude about being rightly related to community. Number one, who can help me? When I'm in community, that can be our classroom, that could be on the field, who is there to help me? Who can lift me to a higher plane? So we as teachers, or especially as parents, it's good to ask our kids, what did you learn from Mr. Smith? What did coach say about your game today? To gear their minds. Look, you're there not just to be there, not just to be in that community, you're there to learn. And there are people in that community that you can learn a lot from. What did Mrs. Smith say about your writing or about how you approached your writing? What did Mr. Jones say about your science project? Not just you did your science project, not just you did your essay writing, but what did that person, that mentor, that coach, that teacher, that instructor have to say about lifting your work onto a higher plane? That is to answer the question, who can help you? Then the second question is, who can you help? This is critical because when you're in community, everyone is a teacher to you, and you have a responsibility to everyone. There may be some who could use your coaching, some who could use you to include them. Oftentimes I think children can use a lot of coaching on when you're in class. Do you have an awareness of everybody in the class? Do you have awareness when somebody's left out? Do you have an awareness when somebody's picked on? Do you have awareness when somebody doesn't understand it? It's a different kind of learning, because then when you contribute to that person, you end up growing. It fits. To be useful to other people fits. One of my most successful strategies in teaching math is have children work in groups of 2, 3, or 4, where they solve the same problem. There's no grading, but they learn from each other. While the kids who understand the material and are able to explain it, they feel so good about themselves. And to the kids who are learning from others, they're so grateful. If for nothing else, it's not Mr. D that's teaching them. Their friends have much more compassion, I think, sometimes. But they're aware of everybody that's in the class. I love to see young people who recognize when someone's not a part of the group, and they find a way to bring them in. This is teaching inclusiveness. They're going to need this lifelong. You don't go around in life just hanging out with your buddies and expect to grow. You're involved with people, and you're actively engaged with other people to learn, sometimes to help, sometimes to guide, but also to learn. They have histories, they have perspectives on life that can be little light bulbs to help you understand better yourself and the pathway to grow. And then finally, the third question you can ask is, how can you enrich your community for growth? How can your growth community, how do you enrich it? I would use the example sometimes in classes for children to understand how I conduct myself, how I respond to the teachers, how I react with others is important for the entire class. In other words, to be rightly related to community, to be in community, is I take care of that community. If I'm a coach, I used to coach football. And boy, I really liked the kid who wasn't necessarily that good of a ball player, but they knew that football is a team sport. You got to hang together as a team. So they would be encouraging others, they'd be supporting others. They'd do things that others didn't want to do because they wanted the team to be strong. And with that sort of view, they end up learning. They end up becoming a better person because they care about the community at large. So you see, relatedness, the way we're describing it in self-determination literature, means I'm connected to the communities, their natural communities, school, colleagues, all kinds of different communities we're in, and I'm there to grow. There's people to learn from. There's people who are ahead of me, who are mentors. There's people that are just where I'm at, but they approach things differently. They look at things differently. They exercise differently. I can learn from them. And in that environment, I learn from my peers. I learn from the people who are ahead of me, and I learn in helping others that are within that community. These three things, competency, autonomy, and relatedness, are all built on helping, being the characteristics, the attitudes, the skills, the attitudes that cause lifelong learning and cause lifelong growth and becoming a better person, not only accomplishing what we're able to accomplish, but making a meaningful impact on the world we live in. Thank you.